first, and then I have a couple of things to say, and then we open it up for questions, comments, discussions in this regard. What do you think?
Sounds great.
Okay, so you want to start?
Start. Okay. My name is Missy Crutchfield. I'm with Gandhi's Be Magazine, and that's BE Magazine, like Be the Change, .org. We also have the Gandhi Global Center for Peace, and we partnered very closely with Egyptians Abroad for Democracy Worldwide, and I brought cards over there, so please feel free to get one. Collaboration is so important, and as Dr. Ali mentioned a minute ago, this is not just about Egypt, this is about human rights globally and working together. Where I speak, we really focus heavily on the importance of the individual voice of the people and movements of nonviolence, which is at the heart of the Gandhi Global Center for Peace. We want to build partnerships and really kind of be a think tank for nonviolent revolutions and movements. We are constantly asserting the power of, as I mentioned, the voice, and through social media, we're in a time and a moment that's never been experienced before. So we can hold corporations, we can hold corporate media, business, governments accountable, because we can share our pictures, we can share our stories, and it can happen very fast, and it is. So like in Washington, D.C., at a protest we were doing that was for Gaza several weeks ago, pointing to the Washington Post and saying, speak the truth, media, tell the truth. So we're trying to, again, hold accountability, corporate voices in media, and lift up and empower the people's voice. So we're asking people to share and increase their Twitter followers and Facebook and open groups, and just really, the pictures aren't going to tell a lie. We were in New York recently, so I am not Egyptian American. We partner with Egyptian Americans and Egyptian organizations because this movement is so close to my heart. I see this as a movement that can inspire and really resonates with all human rights violations and genocides that are happening. The challenges in Central Africa, the challenges in Palestine, and this military coup government, this illegal coup that kidnapped, literally and figuratively, the democracy that was first time ever in Egypt. So looking at America and being American, looking at our tax dollars, because someone recently said, why is this important to you? It's important because as an American citizen, I look at over $1.3 billion that are going to Egypt that aren't going to help the people. Because you've got hunger and lack of education and resources and real destitute situations there, and this money is going to a military regime. This money isn't going to help the people. And then you look at, again, the situation with Palestine, and with last summer the Gaza bombings and the Rafah crossing was blocked, and the Palestinians had nowhere to turn. So Sisi's blood on his hands is not just through the massacres that happen at multiple squares, but also through blocking the Palestinians. He has both Palestinian and Egyptian blood on his hands. Being an American in a country that holds a gold standard for democracy and freedoms, how can we turn our back on that? How can we not speak out and hold our leaders accountable? Again, social media, in any way that we can share our voices and demand that America speak and protect those freedoms in other countries, not just our friend, or certain countries, but for all countries. We should support countries, no matter what religion, no matter what location. It's about democracy. In New York, and recently speaking about this and making more friends, this has really given me an opportunity to learn more about this and bond with these groups and move forward. If you wanted to know a little how it got started, we partnered with Mahatma Gandhi's grandson, Arun Gandhi. So Gandhi's vision and what he did in India resonates now more than ever. I mean, the whole Be the Change phrase, everyone is very excited about that, and really understanding as an individual and as globally we can all be the change, small or large. So with that, I started following this and got to know the movement in Egypt and what's happening there. In New York, I was sharing a little about my background in Times Square. We were talking and holding some protests and some demonstrations, and I'm learning a little Arabic. So one of the things that I was saying is I learned yaskid Hokm al-Askar, which means down, down with the military coup.
يسقط حكم العسكر.
So I'm trying to learn a little Arabic while I'm sharing and embracing nonviolent revolutions and trying to learn about all people and human rights everywhere. And we have dozens and dozens of human rights groups from CODEPINK, and we're working with Medea Benjamin, who's founded that, and Janet here's today with CODEPINK, and we're working closer than that. But dozens and dozens of human rights organizations, from Human Rights Watch, and the data, the files that they have on this. So really, any way you look at this movement that's happening and the horrors that are coming out of the military illegal coup regime under Sisi, all roads point to, all organizations that exist for human rights point to, this is wrong, this regime is wrong, and we have to change it. And in this country, we are very blessed to be able to speak about freedom, democracy, and try to hold people more accountable here in this country. So in kind of wrapping it up, sharing recently, celebrating Dr. King's life, his birthday, he in America led us through one of our darkest periods through the American apartheid, and which was inspired by Mahatma Gandhi, Dr. King's work. Mahatma Gandhi inspired Mandela, Nelson Mandela, and that apartheid. And then we now look at who the interests are and where Sisi's hands are and his power and the corruption is happening. And you have to also look at, there is an apartheid that's happening in the world now that really we're not addressing in this country on a level that we must, and that's in Israel, the apartheid that's happening against the Palestinians. So all of this is tied, it's all about global movements of nonviolence, the people and what happened in the squares. It was nonviolent action and addressed issues of freedoms and meeting and gathering, and the result was a violent attack. So that is just wrong. Finally, the Rabba sign, as I spoke in several places in New York and a couple of theaters and shares the child, it was this for us. It was the peace sign. And now the global sign for human rights, democracy, freedom, and social justice is Rabba. So this is not just about Egypt. It was born out of Egypt and this nonviolent revolution, but it resonates now and will continue to with everyone. Rabba is our sign for human rights, freedom, democracy, and social justice. Thank you so much.
Thank you. يسقط حكم العسكر. يسقط حكم العسكر.
And next time I'll learn another phrase.
Oh yeah. Thank you, Missy. Thank you. That means a lot for us, for all human beings, not just for people in Egypt, but for all human beings. And you really, what you said, you represent the spirit of what America is all about.
Yes.
This is how was the country founded, and its values, its ethics has to be carried by people like you. So the rest of the world does not see in America the bombs, the airplanes, but they see people who carry the values. And please continue. It's a long journey. You will have lots of struggles ahead of you. And we're really happy, honored to join hands in this journey together, learn from one another, so that we do not to stop after Egypt gets its freedom back, but we continue this to other parts of the world. And if you have Mahatma Gandhi, you have Nelson Mandela, you have Martin Luther, and now we have Muhammad Morsi. So it is still four again. Yeah. So hopefully this will be really.
Can we say that again, please?
Yeah, we have Mahatma Gandhi, we have Martin Luther, who learned from Mahatma Gandhi, Dr. King, and then we have Nelson Mandela, who learned from both, and then now we have Muhammad Morsi, and that is the Rab'a sign. It has lots of meanings. It has peaceful resistance, it has democracy, human rights, social justice, and the human dignity, and it has the four leaders together: Mahatma Gandhi, Dr. King, Nelson Mandela, and Muhammad Morsi. That is very important for all of us to continue working together, and we would like not to limit it to the four, we would like to add to the four so that we will have lots of people who follow these different leaders who inspired us all to continue our peaceful struggle for justice and freedom for all human beings. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So I'd like to start with a couple of brief personal memories, and then I will talk a little bit quickly about CODEPINK's work, and then we can get into a general discussion. In February of 2011, I was driving to an ice skating instruction. And the news broke on Democracy Now! Of the successful overthrow of the Mubarak regime and the success at that time of the revolution. And I started crying from joy so hard that I had to pull over to the side of the road. And then in September of 2012, when I was in Manhattan for what was called the first birthday or the first anniversary of the Occupy movement, which the Egyptian revolution directly inspired and aided, I was quite afraid of the police. And as I headed out to the streets near Wall Street that morning of September 17th, 2012, I told myself, be like Egyptians. And the example of Egyptians in Tahrir Square and elsewhere has remained with me and is a powerful inspiration to me and many other people. So I will now say a few things about what CODEPINK has been doing over the past several years. CODEPINK's organizational history with Egypt actually started in December 2009 when hundreds of international activists organized by CODEPINK and other organizations went to Egypt first and were trying to enter Gaza through the Rafah crossing. And there were many clashes with the police, negotiations, and so on. Finally, 100 activists were permitted to enter Gaza to meet people there and deliver aid packages. And we learned a lot, of course, during that period about Egyptian politics, too. Then in February of 2011, Medea Benjamin, CODEPINK's co-founder and co-director, went to Cairo to connect with people and send reports back to the United States. And during that period, CODEPINKers, including myself, joined in the solidarity rallies and marches in San Francisco, Washington, D.C., Chicago, and I'm sure in other places. There was a particularly joyous walk on the Golden Gate Bridge, which I participated in. And a young Egyptian man addressed us at a rally at the south end of the bridge. Our other co-director, Jody Evans, was a producer of the Oscar-nominated film The Square, featuring 5 Egyptians in Tahrir Square during 2011-2012. If you haven't seen that film, I encourage you to do so. It's a very powerful presentation of the courageous movement. And in DC, CODEPINK has organized or participated as an ally in many protests of the Sisi regime in front of the White House, the State Department offices, and the Egyptian embassy, and in congressional hearings. We have been advocating for the release of Mohammed Sultan, a 26-year-old U.S. citizen who graduated from Ohio State University and returned to Egypt to participate in the democracy movement there. He's on a hunger strike now over 370 days. I'm sorry. In an Egyptian prison. And yesterday I read the news that his trial has been postponed yet again to February 11th. Our blog, Pink Tank, has published 2 recent articles by a young Egyptian woman journalist, Manar Amar. And the most recent one was Egyptian Women Gather for, and excuse me if I'm not pronouncing this correctly, Shima al-Sabah. Yeah. The young woman who, on January 24th, as probably all of you know, but I'll say it for the record, went to lay flowers in memory of those murdered in Tahrir Square before she was murdered by the police. And now moving on to the complicity of the U.S. government with the Sisi regime. Medea Benjamin wanted me to be sure to inform all of you that 10 Apache helicopters have been recently sent from the U.S. to Egypt. The yearly so-called aid to the Egyptian government of $1.6 billion for this year. Some of it has been sent. Only 650 billion out of the 650 million of 1.6 billion have been sent. Secretary of State now, Kerry now has to certify to Congress that, quote, Egypt is on the road to democracy. So how is he supposed to do that? That money should absolutely be stopped from going to the Sisi government. And I'll just, I have some suggestions for what people here can do, but I want to hear from other people first, and I'll just end my prepared remarks with this quote. In an editorial entitled, "Why is the World Silent?" smuggled out of Egypt's Torah portion, former Morsi advisor Khaled Al-Khazaz asks, I know why the Egyptian military government demands my complete silence, but please answer me this. Why are you so silent about me? And so I'm one of CODEPINK and other organizations, one American who's determined not to be silent and to take action.
Thank you. Thank you for your words, for your courage, for your support for human rights. All human beings deserve to be, all human beings' rights deserve to be respected regardless of race, gender, religion, cultural background. And that is the journey we would like to do it together. I am really honored to be with both of you.
Thank you so much.
And we would like to continue this journey. And on your behalf, I would like to really thank Medea Benjamin for the work she's doing, for her leadership. She's doing a great job for humanity. And she traveled to Egypt and she was stopped in the airport. And her arm was broken in the airport by Egyptian police. So the Egyptian police is doing damage not only to Egyptians, but all those who visit Egypt will suffer because of the consequences of this police mentality. They do not respect the human rights. Now, concerning the certification of Mr. Kerry about the Egyptian election, let me be honest with you. If it happens, has to be an alternative. If we can show them, help them to understand that there is a better alternative. Let us be engaged in producing better alternative to the situation in Egypt. I don't want to take that much time from you. I am really happy, Shayma al-Sabah and Sundus and so many young women who are suffering. Many of them, about 84, are in jail now, and you cannot imagine. I met someone in Seattle, Washington, and he was telling his story. He spoke about his mother, who was 74 years of age, and he has a sister. She is the only sister. He said the police came and wanted to arrest the 70-year-old woman. And that girl of 19 said, why are you taking my mom? She's 70 years of age. And the reason was she was active on Facebook. So the girl said, please don't take my mom. I will go instead of her. And you know what? They took her. And until today, she is still in jail. There are many stories like this. These are not stories that we say just to have a feeling now, but those stories we need to do a lot of work, because that girl can be my daughter, can be anyone's daughter, and that's the struggle for all of us. Any suffering anywhere is suffering everywhere, and any injustice anywhere is injustice everywhere. And I strongly believe that the work you both doing and the work we are doing, trying to do, will be really, will push the journey for human rights into another level. We don't want human rights of one group and oppress the rights of other group. And then that other group, the oppressed, will come and abuse the rights of the oppressors. We don't want to do this and keep doing it this way. We would like to bring it to that level so that both all human beings can enjoy their rights and live better life. I am really happy to open this discussion. Please feel free to ask questions, make comments, tell us a story, share anything that you would like. We would like to start with you. Please.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Missy, I admire you very much. And, you know, talking about Gandhi and about Nelson Mandela, well, not Nelson Mandela, but Gandhi and, I'm sorry,
Dr. King.
Dr. King, and all of the peace activists that have dedicated their lives to peace and protesting against violence, they have been killed. They have been assassinated. That's the point that today in the conference where it needs to be brought up, that these people are not the violent one. The people that kill them are the violent one. And concerning the media, like we talked about earlier, the propaganda and the media role in informing the American public is very important. And you have a heavy load on your shoulders to to apply that knowledge to let the American people know about how the media is abused in Egypt. During the year of President Morsi's ruling or presidency, not one journalist has been in jail. Not one media channel has been closed. None whatsoever. And then right after the coup, they closed all the...
Al Jazeera, right, free HA staff.
Exactly. And then now they had 3 journalists from Al Jazeera were in jail for 300 days. One was Australian, one was Egyptian Canadian, and one is Egyptian. Now, they released the Australian journalist.
Raises global awareness on what's happening. It puts the pressure on elected officials and companies. It puts a spotlight on them, so it's a little more difficult to be corrupt. It's a little more difficult to be making these backroom deals when the spotlight is on you. So when we're challenging mainstream media and saying, you know, speak the truth and calling them out, hopefully appealing to some sort of integrity, journalistic or otherwise. And we're seeing some change happen there. When we met over the summer with the staff from the Senate Foreign Relations Committee in Washington, D.C., and brought an Egyptian-American student, Rutgers student, Omar, who was at Araba and has bullets still in his body from being shot there. And it's a miracle he's here. But so now his life is very dedicated. He said, before I was like a typical teenage boy and, you know, wasn't interested in politics. He was just happened to be in Egypt and then went to the square to check out what was happening and get shot. So now his life is about human rights and making a difference. So he was sharing his story, his testimony with the staff from Senate Foreign Relations, and I was surprised because they were agreeing. Now I thought we were going to have to do a little defending and make some comparisons and really, and they said, we understand. They agreed with what we said. Their problem, we're talking to staff, is that they said you have to keep this alive because every day you're fighting with corporate money and sponsorships and, you know, where the ties are and where the allies are, because, you know, we're trying to make a point about justice for all people, not just our friends, but unfortunately here we are, and, you know, our friends may not be for a lot of the mainstream media or for Congress, for instance. You know, who's getting ready to speak to Congress? Insane. Okay, so, and a real slap in the face of the presidency, and these are warlike actions, but I'm not going to go into that too much because there's a conversation happening about that, and that's good. Anyway, so they said you're up against what's happening in Palestine, you're up against all of these other things, so you have to keep this conversation alive so that they'll take action. So the minute that we get silent, the minute this issue, Egyptians become invisible, they're not interested anymore. It's ridiculous, it's very hypocritical, but it's the truth. So the more that we can share these stories, go sit down with your congressman, have people write letters, because votes and numbers mean things to them. They want to get reelected, you know, the ugly truths of all of these things. The big media wants their sponsorship, so when they see, I'm going to, you know, BDS is real, I'm going to, you know, blast you through my social media, and enough people do that, then they're going to pay a little attention. So we have to keep these stories alive. We have to frame this in a way that Raba is not just, and it's enough that it's about Egyptian. I mean, this should make you mad, but this is about human rights, global human rights, and the dozens of human rights and social justice organizations that are behind this, that really aren't interested necessarily in the Muslim Brotherhood or Morsi or anything, that they're interested in human rights, justice violations, and genocides that are happening. So we are on the side of the right, and we just have to keep the stories alive and point our finger at the politicians and the corporations and the media and say, tell the truth. And then we stay behind them with our pictures, with our social media, and increase our base. I tweeted, my Twitter name is Sisters Speak Out. And so I tweeted out, follow. You know, some people, they like a big following, they don't follow so many people. I will follow you if I see you're about social justice and this nonviolent revolution. I will follow you. I ask that everybody be respectful. Sometimes I'll go and check, and some people start calling names. No, don't. You know, let's be respectful. This is about social justice and democracy. So let's keep the higher ground. But if you are about nonviolent revolution, social justice, this movement, I will follow you. We have to increase our friends, increase ways that we can get the message out, and then put the heat on the powers that be.
Thank you.
I would like to hear from the younger people in this room. And also, I would ask, could everybody come up to the first two rows?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just, you know, let's like sort of increase our energy together. And also we can see you better.
We could even put in a circle.
Yeah, or maybe we can, kind of soften the thing here. So, although I know you're video's on camera, which
Live
is
streaming.
great. Live
It's a live
streaming, that's great. Thank you so much for doing that.
You had, there was a question.
Well, I just wanted to actually give a bit of my experience. I've been in Egypt pretty much for most of my adult life, since 2007. I was in Egypt in 2012, from June until December. I was in Egypt during Ramadan. I was in Egypt this past summer during the election of Sisi. And I would just want to say that I think that the way in which we experience what is happening in Egypt in the United States through the media obviously is very, very biased from what would happen if you're actually living in Egypt. And I would say that, obviously what is happening right now in Egypt is utterly appalling. It is a very scary situation, only because being there for the past 3 years throughout these different transitions, I can say that the election that did occur in June was not a false election. And this is the scariest part. So we can't necessarily say that there's not democracy happening in Egypt, but it's the way in which people are buying the narrative that Sisi and other members in government have sold the wider Egyptian public. So those that a year ago or a year or two ago would have supported President Morsi are now full throttle supporters of President Sisi. And so I think that we have to be very careful in thinking about, there's a vast majority of people in Egypt, scarily enough, are in support of Sisi. And what does that actually mean for the way in which he gains public support? Whether it's among Muslims or Christians, it's both equally scary. But I also want to say that since the revolution, there has not been a stop in human rights violations or clenching down on the media or whatever, whether it was under Morsi or whether it's under Sisi. Let's also remember that, yes, while under Morsi, there's many powers that were against his administration. There were many powers that didn't allow for him to govern appropriately. But we also have to take into account that under Morsi, yes, journalists did die. We can't forget that Al-Husseini Abu Daif, who was killed at the protests in Ittihadiyya in November of 2012. We can't forget that also media outlets in the early fall of 2012 were also liberal media outlets like Dream TV were also clenched down upon. But that's not to say that what happened during Rab'a was warranted in any way, shape, or form. Absolutely not. That's not to say that what ended up happening to Morsi in June of 2013 was okay in any way, shape, or form. But that's also to say that we can't also kind of give our experiences to what actually happened on that day during the Rab'a. I mean, I was on my way to Alexandria that day, and then had to turn back to go to my home that was near the second protest, the Nahda protest. And when I came back into the streets, there was no police except people with like Kalashnikovs and like other weaponry. And we had to quickly go into my apartment before, you know, anything bad had happened. And I think that we in the United States need to have a very critical lens to thinking about the ways in which we can support you know, it's easy to say, yeah, we support human rights, obviously, but human rights has a very interesting history for the United States and what we support and what we don't. And I think that we really need to kind of be critical of what is happening in Egypt, but stick to our kind of principles on, you know, protecting life, protecting all life, whether it be of, you know, of different political factions or whatever. So I just want to say, like, we should also think about, you know, the ways in which, yes, there are thousands of ex-Muslim Brotherhood members or Muslim Brotherhood members that are in secret jails in Egypt presently, and that is also not okay. And they're not part of the hierarchy. The hierarchy has been placed into padded cells that are not necessarily underground, where people are being tortured for their political associations with the Muslim Brotherhood. And so we need to kind of textualize kind of what is actually, you know, happening, even within the Muslim Brotherhood as well in Egypt, which has just somehow disappeared within the past year, but they've disappeared to hidden jail cells. So.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks a lot for sharing your experience, and it is important to listen to these different experiences because they say a lot. And the situation in Egypt is very complicated, and no one person can say that I know it all. I don't. No, I could. Sometimes there are things that I don't understand. The support, for example, for Sisi is very surprising to this time. How would you support the military after millions of people went to the streets against the military rule? But let us not forget that the percentage Dr. Morsi won the election was 52%. So we were talking there was 48% opposing. That's an important factor. A second factor, the military controls about 40% of the economy. And that is not just a percentage that we say it like this. That means controls 40% of the labor force. So for example, if it decides to close the streets in Cairo or to cut the gas on the whole of Egypt, they can easily do this because they control the companies, they control the labor force there. Concerning fair and free election of Sisi, allow me to disagree a little bit with you on this regard, because when people cannot express their opposition because of fear of being arrested, so it is very difficult to say that he had lots of support, because you remember during that election, it was just for one day, and then very few people turned out to go to vote. Then they extended for another day, so that they literally forced people, even on TV, they used to tell them, if you don't go out, Muslim Brotherhood are coming back, and they started the scare tactics to force people. Even they started talking about punishing those who don't go to vote. And in spite of all of this, the percentage that gathered at the end was not really enough to call it a fair and a free election. Especially with comparing Morsi's year with Sisi is very much unfair, because not a single media outlet was shut down. Even the one you mentioned, the Drink and the liberal media, it was not shut down. There was disagreements. That's fine. Even Morsi was insulted many times personally. Barnamik Basim News UNICEF, and so many other programs.
And he forgave
And he did,
everybody.
But there were
because
cases against.
maybe individual cases, but not like what is happening with
Of course.
Yeah, and the other thing is, you mentioned the name of Al-Husseini Abu Dhaif. It is very important to understand that was not, I differentiate between violence. All forms of violence need to be condemned. But for example, if someone dies in a car accident, maybe it is wrong what the other driver is making, either drinking and driving or something. So Hussein Abu Dhaif is very important to, while you talk about him, because the judiciary is talking about Hussein Abu Dhaif, at the same time, in the same incident, 9 members of the Muslim Brotherhood were killed. And you see that the farce is when they wanted to bring that case against Morsi, they talked about that one person because 10 people, or 11 people were killed. One is Husseini Abu Dhaif, and the other 10 were members of the Muslim Brotherhood. So killing is bad for everyone, whether Husseini Abu Dhaif other than Husseini Abu Dhaif.
So they're talking about, if you can highlight a little more of that, Dr. Dardery, because really what's disturbing is whenever we're not belittling or underestimating the value of any life, of anybody with any background or any ideology. So we talk a lot when Shema Sabah, of course, feels so sorry, he's an Egyptian. But on the other hand, when tens of other Egyptians from other background, they're killed or they're imprisoned, the media don't highlight that as much as it gets highlighted. It highlights Al-Hussein Abu Dhaif and Shema Sabah and Ahmed Abu Duma. So there are like thousands, as you mentioned, Dr. Muhammad Badi, who is the leader of the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt. He's a professor, he's a scientist, and many others like him are in prison, but the media yet not able to highlight on those figures while they're imprisoned or killed as well. So can you give us a little bit of why is that? Why everybody, like if it's Hussein Abu Dhaif, then everybody will talk about it, and then what if somebody else then?
Yeah, I think Missy talked about this, which you need to, that it is, part of it is on us, that we need to take this information outside. I strongly encourage you to talk about this to the public, especially this thing that you mentioned about developing critical lens in America. So critical lens, and I call upon the American administration and Americans in general not to support any particular part anywhere. Support the process. Be interest-based but also value-based, because sometimes your interest is your value, especially when you think of it on the long term. I strongly think that Egyptian communities, Arab community and Muslim, especially Egyptian, Arab and Muslim students have a lot to do in this. You have really great responsibility. You have to work for justice and the freedom everywhere. And no one can tell you you can't work for justice and the freedom. You work for justice in Palestine, justice in Egypt, justice in Syria, justice anywhere in the world, even in Latin America. You are working for justice, period, for freedom for everyone. And in this case, if we can really work hard to bring this information out, and we need also to humanize all those who suffer. Even if I disagree with Husseini Abu Dhaif, but I do not approve of him not killed, but even being harmed because of his views. That's what he believes in, I should respect. I disagree, but I respect. And that's what we need. But what happened in Egypt, we lived for so many decades under dictatorship. So there was a lack of dialogue. And when there is a lack of dialogue, we become very much politicized. So when you say something, I don't disagree with what you say, but I disagree with you. Even I don't oppose the idea, but I oppose you. Then we become, and that's what led to the failure of the political forces in Egypt. They personalize what is political, and they fail to agree on a common agenda that will allow everyone to take part in the revolution and take part in building up Egypt. And that's what we need. But you as young leaders, you can do a lot in this regard. You can do a lot by working together and by sharing the information you know. And I appreciate if others can tell us their stories, especially your journey, especially MSA among you. If you can tell us about your journey in regard to peace, freedom, and justice. Do you have anything to share about peace, freedom, and justice? It is very important that young students think a lot about this, because you have lots of energy, and you can make good use of this energy if you start working on peace, justice, and freedom. If you would like to add.
I'm just so curious about what this young man in the front row is thinking. And I just want to comment that even though I have no Egyptian or Arab ethnic background in my family, you, sir, look rather like my nephew. And so yes, a handsome nephew, yes. So anyway, so somehow we are all family. We are. I'm sorry if I'm putting you on the spot, sir, but I just am so curious what you're thinking or what you would like to say.
I just wanted to share like a few points. First off, just like a personal experience, even here on campus, just wearing this shirt around, the Rawa shirt, I was asked multiple times, like, oh, why are you wearing that? Are you part of the brotherhood? Are you this or that? And I would have to explain, like, this is a symbol of solidarity. This is not a symbol of some specific movement. This is not any organization. This is a symbol of solidarity with people who died in a specific location, whether, even if it was somewhere other. I'm not Egyptian myself.
Oh,
and I'm wearing this shirt. Like I'm Palestinian, and I grew up here. But I still support, and I'm still standing in solidarity with people in Egypt and people in Syria today, and people in like Afghanistan, people like all over the place, even people here, and like no matter what the location is. And so that's one thing that I feel like is like people associate a specific, people associate this symbol and like other symbols with so-called terrorist organizations, which are not necessarily terrorist organizations, but are labeled as terrorist organizations. Even if we look back at Nelson Mandela, was from the ANC, which was labeled as a terrorist organization, and it's still till today by the United States labeled as a terrorist organization. And the other point I wanted to make was that even within the MSA, like I'm a strong advocate for like these kinds of issues. Whenever I would bring something up like this, or like whether it's in Syria or Egypt or Palestine, I'd always have someone come up and be like, oh no, you don't want to, like even if they support my same cause, they would tell me, oh don't say this, or don't have this event, or don't do this, because there are some people that feel a different way about this. And for me, that's really insulting, because like from my perspective, these people are being oppressed, and from my viewpoint, and from like, I think everyone's like should stand in solidarity with people who are being oppressed and killed. And if someone has a differing view, if someone like let them bring that view forth, and we can discuss it. And that shouldn't be a reason for me not to host a specific event or bring a specific speaker that has a specific idea. And one last point I wanted to make, I did mention I was from Palestine, and one like direct effect that the coup had on the Palestinian people was Mawgoud, the Rafah border. In the time of Morsi, the border was opened, and the supplies were allowed to go back and forth between Egypt and Gaza. And as soon as the coup occurred, one of the first things that was done was that this border was closed. And so it was like Sisi's regime didn't only affect Egyptians, it also affected neighboring countries around them, and like lives of people were put at risk due to this military coup.
This destruction of the city of Rafah seems to me to be taken out of the book of the Israeli government. I really felt the need to bring up that issue. And I do think that so far we have not touched upon a very important factor in terms of U.S. support for Sisi, and then before him for Mubarak, which is of course Israel, the U.S. relationship with Israel, and in some sense not blackmailing, but paying off the Egyptian government to be in a certain relationship with the Israeli government. That's a huge subject that in a way deserves its own, you know, like separate treatment, but it certainly is related.
Yes.
So, yeah, I'm horrified, I'll just say, by what is happening in the Sinai and in Rafah. That is a huge set of issues right there.
If you're not following a couple of student groups, Student Justice in Palestine is amazing. Jewish Voice for Peace, amazing, they're working together. SJP, we covered their conference a few weeks ago in Boston, and JDP is, their conference in Baltimore is coming up in March. Follow them, they're doing amazing things. All working together here. I'd like to hear from the beautiful lady in red.
Yeah, please.
So I'm like to get myself, and what I do want to do is spread awareness of what is happening in Egypt. And you brought up the point of supporting a process. Now, if I were to tell my friends, help me support the process, what would I tell them?
Okay, great. Before I answer that question directly, let me share with you two things. Number one, I met Omar and I asked him about can we take a photo together. I said I'm Palestinian. I said that it's really good about having Rab'a sign because it is a symbol of resistance. And then I discovered that his name is like my son's name. And then I discovered that his second year college like my son's second year college. And I'm really happy today to be speaking to Muslim Student Association because this coincides with my 25th year of being president of the MSI. In 1990, I was elected as the president of Muslim Student Association in University of Pittsburgh. And from that time, that will take me right to your question. From that time, I remember in the 90s, the Intifada was very popular. And we used to have lots of programs about the situation in Palestine and the suffering of Palestinians. And it was really a good thing for me as a young student in University of Pittsburgh to work with so many different groups, so many different students. I felt the essence of my humanity. And I really enjoyed my days as the president of the MSA. And I developed, in fact, I came out of the MSA experience as someone more concerned about the world politics, about the world affairs, about world human rights, and about justice and freedom. And this is the process. The process I am concerned about is we need to support a process, a worldwide process, a process that is very difficult to find two human beings disagree. For that question, in spite of all but you always say that is wrong. That is the process. Putting Morsi in jail, that is wrong. Putting thousands of Muslim brothers, it is wrong. That is what I mean by it. Even if you disagree with them, you don't put them in jail. You don't kill them. And that's if we can agree on an agenda. For example, I like to refer to this Rab'a sign. I like to refer to one is a peaceful resistance. Two is human rights for all. Because those Egyptians who stood, I was there in Rab'a. And they were not really violent at all. They were very peaceful. I spent some of my best days in Rab'a. They were few days, but they were really best days in my life. I used to sit on the floor in the street, pavement, and we used to eat together falafel and ta'amiyas and sandwiches. And we used to have people from Luxor come, spend a couple of days, and then go back to Luxor. So if we can work on this as the items of that process, but it needs to be negotiated. It needs to be discussed with other members, either of your group or others. Peaceful resistance, human rights, social justice is a very important cause. And the other one that I would like to refer to is freedom. Freedom for all. People have the right to believe or not to believe in anything. It is their freedom. And we need to make sure to create an environment where people practice their freedom. So I encourage you and others with student groups, please, do the best you can. These are your best years to work for justice anywhere. Because we can end up suffering when angry Egyptians or angry Palestinians or angry, like what's happening with ISIS. Sometimes they can harm innocent people if we don't work to stop ISIS from spreading in different parts of the world. So this is what I mean by process, but it requires a lot of discussion. and a lot of negotiation with other people. So don't hesitate. Be proactive, be concerned, do something so that the world can become a better place for you and for the future generation, inshallah. Yes,
What can highlight for us about the human rights, social justice, as well as on the land here, on our land here, inside the United States? And we all remember Ferguson and the pictures that came out with the police, how they were militarized, or these words, these verbiages were used in some articles and news media outlets. So if we can elaborate on that too, is our
Well, Ferguson really struck a note to what's happening in Palestine, and I think that the Palestinians in Gaza sent a message to Ferguson and their prayers. It was really very moving what happened. There's also connections with, you talk about the militarization, what happened in Ferguson, the weapons, the bullets. I think the same company that fires on Gaza and fortifies Israel, the same were shooting on American citizens in Ferguson. It's very, very deep. It's very corrupt. It's very political backroom, and it's got to stop.
I would encourage you or anyone who wants to get people together to start engaging with these issues to show the film, The Square.
Yes.
It's
on Netflix.
It's on Netflix, thank you. It tells the story of 5 mostly young Egyptians, one's more middle-aged, young Egyptians, mostly leftists. One is in the Muslim Brotherhood, and they go to Tahrir Square and take part. And so it follows their journey. It ends a couple of years ago, so it ends a little more happily than the situation is right now. But it's a great story, and it's a beautifully made film. So that gives people something shared to experience and then discuss.
And one of the stars, was it Khaled is his name? It was the star in the Kite Runner. Have you seen that? So
It's a documentary, though.
Yeah.
So that
Real
that
life is like
actor is, yes, one of the 5 people
Yeah,
who's
for real.
featured. But he's real, and yeah.
And he's part of the movement now in Egypt and wants to live in Egypt now and just continue this work, this human rights work. It's really amazing.
Yeah.
One quick thing, because I'm watching the news this morning and I'm seeing what's happening in Ukraine, and to your point about how we have to watch this as a country and through a very critical eye and as objective as possible. And so I'm listening to what Secretary of State Kerry is saying, that we can't close our eyes to what's happening in Ukraine, what's going on. So I'm thinking this is so surreal, because we could just interchange what Israel is doing to Gaza and what Sisi is doing to the Egyptian people. It's exactly the same thing, but we're choosing to, buddy up, to be friends with. We have to stop. Oh, well, we're going to support them. No, we support democracy. If we're going to hold a gold standard or continue to live and be, one of the greatest countries in the world, if we want to keep this, because right now I kind of feel like we're just living on reputation, that we're losing a lot of clout, a lot of credibility, and the more we point and call people terrorists, the more we're creating that. And there's nothing that creates more fertile ground for terrorism than poverty and oppression. So if we want to lift countries up, we can't just pick and choose our friends. We have to lift countries up as the people are crying and trying to find democracies. And it's not going to just jump to the level of democracy in this country. They're going to have to go through their steps just like we did here. But we support them.
Yeah, well, I think democracy has been really eroded in this country. One way to start getting it back is to raise our voices on these foreign policy and budget matters. Yes, internally in Egypt, it is a complex, dynamic, difficult, highly contentious situation, and will remain so. And, I took 12 pages of notes until my wrist was aching today, right? And I'm going to write and share what I learned, from the 3 of you with others. But for me, I have to say, as a U.S. citizen and taxpayer, it's, from the outside, it's simple. Cut the so-called aid to zero. That's the exact amount that should be going to that government, is zero. And I think, you know, it's a long way to get there, but I am encouraged, even though 650 million of 1.6 billion has gone to the regime, there's been enough pressure to keep the rest of that money from being released. And maybe we can keep it from being released if we keep the pressure on
Right.
Kerry. And also, just getting back to the Israel issue, because I just do think this is so important. There's pushback against Netanyahu coming to address both houses of Congress. A number of members of Congress have already said that they will not go. Several organizations, including CODEPINK, are online. We're sending messages to all the senators and representatives, and we're also asking people to call. Don't attend Netanyahu's speech. If enough members of Congress say that they're not going, there's hope that it will be canceled. Anyway, I think Netanyahu has overstepped himself. And I think that, of course, along with the issue of our tax dollars going to the government in Egypt, is an
And
even
Israel.
more important issue of our tax dollars, and even more of them going to the government of Israel.
Yes.
And we can push back on this, and we can hold to the thought that this will come to an end, and that our tax dollars will be put to the legitimate, real human needs of people here at home, which is the first place that they should be designated for, but also for other people in other countries. That's what democracy is. People deciding jointly in an honest and fair manner how we are going to spend our collective resources. So I would also just say on that point, always follow the money. In any political situation, who is funding whom and for what reasons? The money will tell you a great deal that the rhetoric never will.
That's why social media is so powerful, because they can, sponsors can pull strings, advertisers, government in the back room, but as long as I have this, I can take pictures, I can tell stories, and send video, they're not going to stop me. So the people will win this. It is a nonviolent revolution, and unfortunately people have been hurt and people will continue to get hurt, but if we don't do this, if we don't keep it nonviolent, if we don't keep this going, then more will. And as humanity, globally, for all of the movements, we won't move forward, we will win. Gandhi said, first they ignore you, then they laugh at you, then they fight you, then you win. We'll win.
That's very important. And very important for all of us to continue this journey. This journey is not going to end tomorrow or after. This journey is likely to continue. We would like to have as many people as we can so that we can work together. And it is not for our own personal benefits, it's the benefit for all. Because the more we have better human rights record anywhere, the better for all, for the rest of humanity. Let us keep working. Let us do the best we can. We have a lot on the plate, and we can do it. Small step at a time, and the younger, the better if you can start.
Our future.
Yeah. Future,
Brava.
yeah.